those of you who remember last year, I have instructions from my wife here. Speak up and look out. Although the order is look out. So, of course, I want to thank Wyatt and Barbara always, Megan, both Adams, Hastings, all of the staff who are wonderful and comparable. I want to thank my old friend, Greg Williamson, for stepping in for Mary Jo Salter, about whom we should be thinking in the weeks ahead, and her daughter. But Greg for his flawless ear, his canny and droll wit. And the members of our workshop, who are a wonderful group. We've had 2 classes. There have been no fist fights. It's been, I think, kind of marvelous. So I'm going to begin with a poem, and I'll probably read more than one poem about on this subject, about my father. He died a year ago this spring on his 89th birthday. We were all with him. However, we'd been with him through the night, and we knew he was dying. But about 2 hours before he actually died, we all decided, well, let's go out. We're in Portland, Oregon. There's lots of great things to do. Let's just do that. Let's go to Powell's. Let's go to let's go to, my sister works for Nike. Let's go to the Nike employee store. Let's do those things. And we were gone when he died. But we came back immediately, and we gathered around him. We were with him. I have 2 things I need to tell you about him. One, he was a minister of the gospel, and he died with a full head of white hair, which he was proud of, especially because I'm bald. This is called Our Father Who Art Somewhere Now, We Hope. In the first minute without him, I felt love for what he left behind, though it was empty, and kissed his forehead, and knew it would dissolve with all the rest in fire and memory. The last word he said to me was water, repeated 3 times, and I made a joke about what Christ got for his thirst, vinegar. I put the wet sponge to his lips and stroked. Water had been his last word. And his first? No one is alive who might remember it. All dying may be a process of growing thirst. He beckoned with a curled finger at his mouth. I felt love and said to him, "We loved you," corrected myself, and said it in present tense. He believed love transcended death, or used to. He believed love was an extrasensory sense. Meanwhile, where was he? If not lying there, still present. Such a presence, we all said. His tall man's length and breadth, his preacher's pompadour, his daily need to tell the world he lived. Our Father, after whom we took the world as full of hope and promise, then, like him, as baffling when it ignored us when we called and needed to be found where we had hid. Our Father, who art somewhere now, we hope, although we have the proof of where he is, divided among us in separate memories and things that he loved, marked by his ownership. The minutes keep repeating, each without him. But if eternity is outside of time, there's no time like the present to imagine him, our Father, restored to memory and beyond. In the rented bed in the sunlit sewing room, a dusk rose from his open mouth and eyes. It was our shadow, cast as we crowded around him, meeting his shadow, still falling on all of us. I keep a copy of George Herbert's collected poems on my desk, and I came across a poem that I think I had always sort of ignored. It's longer, and it's not one of the great poems, but it's a kind of wonderful poem. It's kind of goofy. It's called Providence, and in it he tries to explain how all of creation, especially the animals and the plants, are made for humanity and give themselves to humanity. But he has a little problem when he comes to animals like the elephant. He doesn't quite know what to say about it. He ends up saying God made it because to prove he could do it, something. But there's a passage on which I've based this little poem in which he says, the beasts say, eat me. The trees say, pull me. This is Providence. The virus says, breed me. The head says, cradle me. The cancer says, braid me. The heart says, ladle me. The star says, wish on me. The ocean says, plumb me. The moon says, wash me. The plum says, preserve me. The poem says, read me. The fat says, store me. The poem says, seed me. The feet says, perform me. The word says, utter me. The menace says, fear me. The udder says, milk me. The fair says, pay me. The past says, remember me. The sky says, cloud me. The post says, hang from me. The air says, clear me. The soul says, save me. The soul says, only me. Oh, thank you. Oh, all honor to George, really. I'm going to read a series of poems I'm calling Birds, Beasts, and Flowers. There's one effing bird poem in here. But the bird has been cooked. So I'm calling this Birds, Beasts, and Flowers. You may be surprised by some of the beasts I include. The first one I'm going to read is from my book, The Heronry, and it's called Cul-de-sac Idle. Cul-de-sac Idle. The flycatcher feeds its young a lightning bug, frantically blinking. The trees forget the hurricane as they stand still for days. The defibrillator sleeps in a lump under our neighbor's shirt pocket. The flycatcher, snagging its prey, squirms like a trout in midair. The dogwoods this spring blew all their savings on taffeta. The cardiac muscle fibers shudder like untimed pistons. The flycatcher's beak is a leggy mouth of bent pins. The poplars go first, brown bagging their leaves one by one. One false move and the defibrillator kicks like a hoof. There are words that stop and start sunlight, moonlight, and starlight. Verbs like the motion of thought, nouns like dreams and daydreams, and the end of the world, and the end of the end, right here. This is called Bat. When I was a late teenager and for a time in college, my parents would take us to the Sierras to vacation. And I remember evenings there, I was 19, thinking I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I thought the bats understood something about that. I would watch them. So there's a little rhyme scheme in this that I'm kind of pleased with, in which you can hear the echolocation, I hope, of the bats. This is simply called Bat. I remember the Sierra Pond, where at evening bats went dipping. Pilgrims with sharp chins dipping to holy water, preying on mosquitoes as if praying. I watched them envying their purpose, wanting at 20 some purpose. Snap the hatchling as it rises, skim the darkness as it rises. I wanted that perfected arc, hunting life along an arc, both creature and creator. What is it now about the creature appearing at a sudden angle, wavering through dusk? Angel of hunger at the night's rim, like a card flicked at a hat brim. Now I read it like an icon blinking on a screen. And ken something there that's meaningful, a little void that's never full. And oh dear. Anyway, I'm going to read a poem about what's called Mothering Sunday in England, where we lived for a year 30 years ago. 30 years ago? Yes. Instead of Mother's Day, they have Mothering Sunday. And on Mothering Sunday, mothers bring their children, and the children during the service present their mothers with a flower, usually a daffodil. We would call it perhaps a jonquil, but the daffodils are just up in England. This is Mothering Sunday. It was Mothering Sunday, so different from Mother's Day in an American church. For English style, the custom was both abashed and bold. They gave their mothers flowers, daffodils, because it was early spring, and quietly returned to quiet liturgy. We watched a mother with her dirty son, a street person she seemed to have brought in, although clearly he was her son. The tanned, sunken profile he turned to us showed the family resemblance, though the blue-black filth of his slick parka and slick hair were clearly all his own. When it came time to bestow a daffodil, he shrugged and turned and headed for the exit. Why had he come at all? To leave her gaping. He stalked out before the flowered mothers could enjoy the drawn-out service in their honor. Everyone, except his mother, refraining from looking after him. So we looked at her. The flower didn't matter. He'd been her flower. So here's a poem about a beast. This is called Bullet Points. Your approach arouses the earth. The sun itself has rubbed off on your luster. The world twists and turns in your glare. Artists name their disasters after your personal sacrifices. Allies strut like starlings around you. Scavengers flock to your leavings. They sing that your awful is better than all other awful. Those who would undermine you flicker in your shadow. The blood that runs away in the street runs back to you. The heads that talk for you stare the camera into the grave. Lies turn to facts as soon as you utter them. If you say the truth is a lie, it becomes true. For you, heaven's tears come down as hail in the sunshine. The one thought in everyone's mind is of you. That's something that has to stop. This is called Sick Fox. We live in a neighborhood called Hillwood in Nashville, and for many, many years we had a den of foxes, and then we lost them. And the word went out on the neighborhood listserv. This is called Sick Fox. News is not good for the foxes on our hillside. Mange is taking all the newborn kits. And out for a walk around the neighborhood, late afternoon, late spring, sky muddy gray. I saw a grown fox lurch from a laurel thicket and waver in the middle of the road that slopes down half a mile to the highway. I watched her. Was she a she? Stagger, stop, chew at a bald spot on her patchy fur, fold her legs up oddly one by one, and sink down near the white dividing line. It must have been the illness I was looking at. She lifted up her head when I came closer and put it down again. The news is not good. It must have been that I was looking at. And grief. I was looking at grief. So let's have a poem about butterflies. We lived for many years at a house with many, many trees around it, but my favorite tree was a persimmon tree that attracted all kinds of animals, foxes, coyotes, opossums, skunks. But my favorite were these little butterflies called satyrs and nymphs and fritillaries that would come to feed on the fallen fruit at the foot of the tree. So this is called Butterflies Under Persimmons, or Under Persimmon. I heard a woman state once that because he peered so closely at a stream of ants on the damp, naked limb of a fruit tree, she fell for her husband. She wanted to be studied with that attention, to fascinate as if she were another species whose willingness to be looked at lovingly was her defense, to be like a phenomenon among leaves, a body that would make him leave his body in the act of loving. Beautifully engrossed. I can't remember what she looked like. I never met the husband, but leaning close to the newly dropped persimmon in the wet grass and the huddle of 4 or 5 hungry satyrs, drab at first glance, the dull brown of age spots flitting away in too many directions too quickly to count exactly, small as they are in the shade of the tree's base, leaning out of the sunlight as if I could take part in the feast there, where mid-September the persimmons drop, so ripe and taut, a touch can break the skin. Leaning close enough to trouble the eye-spotted satyrs no bigger than eyelids and the fritillaries, their calmer companions, like floating shreds of fire, whose feet have organs of taste that make their tongues uncoil and reflex with goodness underfoot. I thought of that woman's lover, there on my belly, in sun and shadow, and wished I could be like that. So I'm going to read a poem called Testimony of a Roasted Chicken. This is the effing bird poem. It's meant to be delicious. There's some Italian phrases in this poem. It's based on an experience we had 45 years ago, living in a little hill town in Italy. But we were recently in Italy for about 3 weeks, and we lived in a little town called Acquiterme in the Piemonte, and Amy was teaching a music festival, and during the day when she would teach, I would go to a park and I would work. And just talking to people, my Italian got pretty good. I gave directions to somebody once. I ordered a train ticket from a ticket agent who complimented me on my Italian. Well, I knew that a big fair was going to start in town, a 3-day fair in honor of their saint, San Guido, and people were going to be coming in from all over. And one day when I was in the park, I noticed that streets were being taped off. And I thought, this must be for the fair. They'll have a parade from the train station. Yes. So I went into a bookstore I'd been going into, and I spoke to the clerk, and I asked him, I thought in good Italian, where can I watch the parade? And he looked at me and he said, in Italian, well, we all take a walk to the bridge in the evening before dinner, the passeggiata. I said, I understand that, but where can I watch the parade? And he sort of stepped back. And I thought, well, okay, I'm obviously not making myself clear. It's not as good as I thought. And I thought about what I'd said to him, and basically what I was saying to him was, where can I make a spectacle of myself? Because I see there's 2-colored tape out here. Should I just go out there and join the others making spectacles of themselves? Anyway, it turned out that they had taped off these streets for a notable women's bicycle contest, the Giro Rosa, and they were coming through, and they were through in 10 minutes. I missed it all. But in testimony of a roasted chicken, there are, I think, 3 Italian phrases. You'll hear them. One is means the way, the truth, the life. The other means the baker woman. And the last one means smells good, huh? This is testimony of a roasted chicken. Standing in drizzle in the twilit piazza, beside the lean Franciscan with his PA system, one of the hill town's aging bachelors, rumpled and plump and damp and brilliantined, tells the buzzing mic the falling rain and darkness about Jesus. La via, la verità, la vita. From lit-up bars, a few of us look out at him, knowing and pitying and finally indifferent. How different later in the bakery. Saturday night, buying Sunday's bread, when he, the sad sack who lives with his mother, comes to pick up the meal cooked for him. Smiling, La Fornaia brings it out, a capon, fat as he is, trussed and steaming, and casting over all an enchantment of rosemary, making every mouth a well of taste. Che profumo, eh? Said the baker, and she grins, as he, whose testimony we ignored, receives his tasty supper from her hands and steers it past our eyes into the night to feast on by himself and with his mother, while we, watching him go, wish we could have some. So one of the reasons we were in Italy, besides Amy's opportunity to teach in this music festival, was to go to Milan and see La Cenacolo, the Da Vinci's Last Supper. And I had seen this painting as a child in 1961. My family had been living in Scotland. My father was serving a church there, and they had an opportunity to travel on the continent, and we drove all the way through Europe. We drove through France all the way down to Italy. And when we got to Milan, the thing Dad wanted to see was, of course, Da Vinci's Last Supper. At that time, you just walked in and you saw it. The church was 16 years past having been bombed, so they had built it back together, and the Last Supper was there. I remember we walked in to the refectory. There was maybe another couple there. There was our family, there were 4 of us, and a couple, I think they were Germans. We looked at it. And we went to the gift store, and Dad bought I describe it here, he bought a reproduction that hung the rest of his career in his church office. This time, we had to plan months ahead to get into it, the Cenacolo, for 15 minutes, where we could see the painting. It had been wonderfully restored. So I'm going to describe the painting in this poem as if it were not restored as beautifully as it has been. But one of the things I think I noticed, I don't know when I noticed this, maybe about 35 years ago, I was in a fellowship hall listening to something, and I looked up and I saw a reproduction of the Last Supper, and I realized in my life I had seen reproductions of the Last Supper everywhere, in churches, especially fellowship halls, all kinds of places. What struck me about the Last Supper reproduction I saw this time, it was made of orange and white macrame, but there it was. And in Nashville, as you may know, there's a famous reproduction, large wood reproduction of the Last Supper you can see. If you want to see it today, as I said, make your reservations months ahead of time. You get 15 minutes. We were in there, and I was almost overwhelmed by the memory of 57 years ago. And I felt myself about to lose my footing. But there was a couple with a child in a stroller, and she began to cry. And these other people who wanted to listen to the guide were very unhappy, but I laughed. I thought, this is great. Thank you for sparing me from making a spectacle of myself. This is a series of poems called Last Suppers, and it's about different reproductions I've seen, including the actual painting. Loneliest when hung in a church annex, like a no-smoking sign, itself ablaze. In the faithful reproductions, the deterioration hangs like religious haze in the upper room. Times I have noticed it was present, fix and obliterate the rooms where it was hung. The scene so intimate in its dismay, familiar as a family's daily warfare. What has happened? It's as if dinner has ended with father drunk again and mother silent. The daughters are enlisted to clean up, they leave, and the sons begin to fight. But no, Christ has forecast his betrayal. The group gesticulates, the traitor shrinks, spilling the salt for bad luck, and the meal is not finished, still has to be eaten. I knew a family who hung a Last Supper above their dining table, a box of glass, like an aquarium of fish and weed, with a light bulb to turn the colors on. I don't have to picture them together. I've sat in their bitter circle, underneath the lit-up masterpiece, heart-sick, knowing dessert was the old man's fist against his eldest and down the punching order to my friend. Septic with unshed tears, he would turn on me, and yet not bring himself to raise his fist. His younger sister would stand up on a chair as Jesus and his apostles were switched off and point and say, "That's God." You had to answer before the scene went dark. You had to say yes to her catechism, that is God. A child, I was brought into a room geometrical with shadows in Milan, and a chill like an embrace from underground. Our silence was a reverence for a picture. There was the great painting behind a rope, and a parental awe I couldn't share. I was impressed by the museum photograph of the bombed church and the story of survival. The copy that we bought was done on silk, as precious as a prayer shawl. It would hang beside my father's desk at church, its colors ancient in the fluorescent humming light. Alone once, going through his desk, I found capsules of ammonia in silk sacks, aids for someone who dealt with the poor in spirit. Cracked one and felt my head snap back. The irony and genius of the thing is that it does not look at us. The foreground figures are obsessed with one another. A landscape watches them through distant windows. Everywhere it appears, in books, in rooms, the painting turns its subjects toward their Lord and one another. Their gestures sing a hymn of self-importance, and he averts his eyes. On our side, the world runs through its days, or if you wish, it braids in endless spirals. And what we occupy are set in motion jars or meshes. When we pause to look outside, pictures look back at us and words respond. Images return our human gaze. But this, despite the copying, resists. What matters is the loneliness of God. Everyone knows the silence like a wind you have to crouch in to eat your food in safety, or the outburst that rains poison on the supper, or dining alone in your room or with a book. Mother coming to the table piping hot, and father on the rocks cranky with bourbon. The children sensing the collision coming, sullen themselves, urging it to happen. The reaction could as easily take place while getting in the car or getting out, around the Christmas tree or television. All it needs is a family's critical mass. And yet the table is a raft to cling to, be calmed. Each pins down an unsteady edge, and when the swell anger rolls through the meal, the inner cry is, save yourself if you can. I have a memory of Passover, crackling with an air of irritation. We feared Elijah would enrage the host if he appeared at all by being late. To put our figures back into that evening, the young couples, the parents, the empty chair, risks the restorer's bungling that can hasten collapse. Better to say we ate together. And not that one kept looking at his plate. One drank several glasses of sweet wine. There was a moment nobody would speak. Two fell out of love across the table. Now the scene only retains its lines. Color and character, the eyes, for example, are lost in clouds of crumbled memory. Whole areas, the room, the year, have vanished. The tumult of the 12 thrusts out a snaking embrace to clutch us close and feel the pressure of our belief or non-belief. It pulls, in either case, the eye close to the faces, and most of them are marred beyond belief. They fade in the pointillism of decay, like blown-up newspaper photography. What moves us in the remnants? Common pathos. Leonardo set the catastrophe in motion by giving himself time to work slowly. Thus mixed a base that let him perfect details. In making the picture right, he made it mortal. Most copies restore exact lines and colors, unsubtly, like parade floats or modern translations of the Bible. But the crudest replica can smell of blood. In the original, the decay is like a smoke cloud, materializing from the walls and ceiling. Someone by now should have called out, fire. And someone has, the calm one at the center. He has said it sadly, fire. And those hearing confer among themselves and make petitions to ascertain if the announcement's really true. Looked at thus, they look ridiculous. But as the smoke clears, they're not what I see. Seized in their poses by a passion's heat, I see a family's uninspired tableau, touched for once by a deep tranquility. They link hands, close eyes, pass a loving pressure. Safe from disasters, only God and art would call down on their heads. When their eyes open, they eat and drink and talk at ease, in peace. I'm going to read 2 more poems. One, if I can find it. It's here somewhere. Yes. All right, I'm going to read a poem from the Heronry, which is longish, and a recent poem, which is shortish. I hate it when poets do this. They know where the poems are. They know where they are. They've made notes to themselves. And somehow, when they get there, they can't read the page numbers. They can't. I know this drives fiction writers crazy. They have everything. They have read for their 40 minutes, 45 minutes. But the poets go, Anyway. As I said, this is a poem from the Heronry. It's called The Northern Lights. I've seen the Northern Lights only once in Vermont, about 28 years ago. And unlike if you've seen the Northern Lights, what you usually see are beautiful colors, green. These were all white. The Northern Lights, they were all white, passing through their stages in sheets and ladders, rivulets and falls, white. A dream of color, or an aftermath of color, stripped to gauze and gossamer. A white electric squall in half the sky, epiphany for the blind, and veils of tears, Magdalene's tears, the tears that Jesus wept. What draws them forth? Mortality and laughter. The sad and funny fact that you will die, and that you've made your children, they will die. Do they hold that against you? Strangely, no. It seems the fair result of being born and is nobody's fault. My parents made me. They went ahead and made me, child of love, child of a loving union, which would end, but which I grew up thinking would not end. The Northern Lights remind me of their love. The drama of my growing up was love as they performed it, everyone noticing. The scintillating cosmic imagery of two who seem to be made for each other as light is made for sheets of summer darkness, as darkness in high summer accepts light. Why did I ever think that they were gods? But I didn't. I thought that they were people, and people love each other for a lifetime. Gods are as fickle as the Northern Lights. Don't ever think of human beings you love and need as like those shifting shimmerings, no matter how liquescent, memorable, enduring against the immortal darkness of the sky. The Northern Lights will break a heart and heal it in the same motion, raveling and unraveling. They are the background music of creation. The song God sang while sinking into rest, the song descended into words and music, oblivious, and yet ready to break hearts, heartbreaking, and yet in the end oblivious. So I have thought about a years ago night, the Northern Lights above a northern mountain, and how the tears came down, and why, forgetting that there is nothing oblivion won't forgive. So I'm going to end with this poem. Shortly after my father died, we're back in Nashville, and one night, and I'd never seen one before, a huge Luna moth appeared under the porch light. I thought, oh my gosh. And so this is called My Father Returns as a Luna Moth. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We're going to read this, and we're all going to go. My father returns as a Luna moth, a green hand under the porch light. He comes back as a tree frog on the kitchen window, blown there by the storm overnight. My father returns as a red wasp and the venom she sticks in my knee. He sleeps in a paper capsule of the nest under the eave. And back he comes as a file of old letters, angry, commonplace, merry, and grim, airmail flimsy, stationary, stiff, from him to me to him. He returns as hymn tunes and cufflinks, a diamond pinky ring that won't fit. He looks out as the passage from Micah engraved on his columbarium niche. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly. He's there in a kiss with sealed lips. He's reborn as the O-gape of his last breath in the solar eclipse. One day his signs and wonders may no longer make me think twice. Will he ever stop returning? Not in my life. Thank you.